From the RSNA, this is the Radiology Artificial Intelligence Podcast. My name is Paul Yi, and I'm a radiologist and co-host of the podcast.
And my name is Ali Tejani, and I'm a radiologist and co-host of the podcast. Each month, we dive into the hottest topics in radiology AI and talk with leading experts, thought leaders, and movers and shakers in the field.
Alrighty, it's officially time for the Radiology AI Fireside Chat 2024. It's so lovely to see everyone here. Thank you all for spending the late hours of your RSNA 2024 with us. We're just so thrilled to see you all. We hope that you've been listening to the podcast because we've enjoyed making the podcast and being with you wherever you obtain your audio tracks there. Before we get started, we have a few familiar faces on our panel today. Of course, our guests need no introduction, but if it's okay, we can start with Dr. Charles Kahn and start with quick introduction. Let us know who you are, what your role is, and anything else you'd like to share with us here today with the podcast.
Thanks, guys. Well, Paul, Ali, thank you all for all the work that you've done with the terrific job of producing the podcast. My name is Chuck Kahn. I'm an abdominal imager at University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and I have the pleasure of serving as editor of the Radiology Artificial Intelligence Journal.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Nina Kottler. I'm an emergency radiologist and the Associate Chief Medical Officer of Clinical AI at Radiology Partners.
Hi, my name is Soo-Jin Kim. I'm currently the Chief Medical Officer at the American College of Radiology, DSI, and also Chief Medical Information Officer at Red AI and MSK Radiologist at the VA Palo Alto.
Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Moy. I'm at NYU, a breast imager. I'm the editor of Radiology. And I guess, fun fact, a third of the paper that we publish is on AI.
Or just around. I've got two mics. This is going to cause a disaster. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Lungren. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer for Microsoft Health and Life Sciences. I'm trying to come up with one more title so I can beat Woojin. Hold on. I am an adjunct professor at Stanford, where I still teach a class in Gen AI and healthcare. I am also a clinical associate professor at UCSF, where I practice part-time.
All right. Thank you for our guests for joining us tonight. So we're going to get started. So here at RSNA 2024, AI is front and center. It's literally in our theme, building intelligent connections. And as we've seen over the past several years, there's really been this hype cycle for AI, right? Like with any new technology, we've got this initial innovation trigger. We've got this peak of inflated expectations. And then we start to learn where AI can go wrong, where we have this trough of disillusionment. And then hopefully we're getting to this stage where we're having this slope of enlightenment and a plateau of productivity. So now that we've seen a lot of the potential for AI over the past years, starting with convolutional neural networks, now moving into the LLM and Gen AI era, let's go into now that the dust is settling. How are things now in 2024? Where is AI going? Will we be replaced? How is the practice going to change in the next few years? So with that, I'd like to introduce ourselves. My name is Paul Yi. I'm a radiologist at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and co-host of the Radiology AI podcast.
And I'm Ali Tejani. I'm a radiology resident at UT Southwestern Medical Center and a co-host of the podcast.
So Ali, I am thrilled to be here. This is, I think, year 3 or 4 of the AI Fireside Chat. You know, it's always a pleasure to be here in Chicago, eating some deep dish pizza, seeing all the latest in technology. And you know what? I know the conference is almost over, but I can't wait till 2025. You know what I mean?
Chuck, you didn't tell him, did you?
Tell him what?
You didn't tell him the news.
Which news was that?
I guess I'm going to have to break it to him, Chuck. Yeah. Well, Paul, go ahead and grab another slice of that deep dish pizza because you're going to need it.
Oh, no.
It's been a great time. It's been a great ride. I've really enjoyed working with you. Really enjoyed working with our listeners over the years as well. It's been a pleasure being, again, in your earbuds at home, talking about all things AI, all things radiology. But I think our time may be limited.
What do you mean?
I was at the radiology editorial offices just before our session here. So Chuck and Linda, I found this clip in the audience in the office there. I think we're going to have to play. You're going to want to check this out, Paul. I think we have a bit of a challenge approaching us here.
Are you guys breaking up with me?
It's not you. It's not me. It's them.
It's them.
It's always them.
All right. So we're diving deep into generative AI in radiology today.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah. And we've got a really interesting radiology AI podcast to unpack.
Oh, cool. Which one?
It's the one with Drs. Charles Kahn, Linda Moy, Nina Kottler, Woojin Kim, and Matt Lungren.
Oh, that's a great lineup. I've heard some of their talks before.
Yeah, they've got a lot of insightful stuff to say. Dr. Moy, she had this really interesting point about like keeping up with the field.
Oh, right. Yeah, she was saying that just relying on journals might not be enough anymore.
Yeah, like by the time the research is published, it's almost old news.
Exactly.
So what did she and the other experts suggest? Like, what are some better ways to stay updated?
Well, she was a big fan of the Radiological Society of North America's AI forum,
Yeah, I've heard of that.
and especially the online community aspect of it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because it allows for, more dynamic, real-time information sharing.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like way faster than waiting for, journal publications.
Exactly. It's a much more fluid exchange of knowledge.
Okay, that's super interesting. And then Dr. Kim, he actually made a point about hands-on workshops.
Yeah, he's all about the practical application.
Yeah. So what kind of workshops was he talking about specifically? Moy, she had this really interesting, so we're diving deep into generative AI. Interesting.
All right. So I think that was pretty good, but they got some words jumbled up in the end there.
Words jumbled up, and I guess we must have missed the conversation. Our panelists have been talking to other podcast hosts before us. So this is interesting, right? We have a new means of consuming information, of creating information, right? Ways that adds tone, adds inflections, adds content that may or may not have happened yet. And so we're seeing new paradigms here. We also have some updates here from our podcast hosts.
Now, speaking of tests, the panel did touch on whether AI could, actually pass radiology boards today.
Yeah, that was an interesting debate.
Yeah. So what were the main points of disagreement?
Well, Dr. Kahn, he argued that while AI has come a long way in image analysis, it still lacks, the nuanced judgment and understanding of complex clinical scenarios.
Which is a big part of those board exams.
Exactly. But then Dr. Kottler countered that, AI is already outperforming humans in certain tasks.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Like detecting small lung nodules on chest x-rays, which are part of the board exams.
Oh, that's true.
I don't know if that's true, but it seems like we have words that are being said.
It doesn't matter if it's true. It sounds good.
Yeah. So in all seriousness, these were AI generated podcasts using the Google's Notebook LM. For those of you who don't know, this was a open source kind of tool that you can use. You can upload a PDF. You can put in a website and ask it to generate an audio podcast. But as we've seen, it might not be exactly what we expect. And so one of our guests, Woojin Kim, published this editorial called Seeing the Unseen, Advancing Generative AI Research in Radiology, where he laid out...
Now, speaking of tests, the panel did touch on whether AI could,
I think the machines are taking over.
actually pass radiology.
They just don't want to stop talking.
That's okay. But anyways, this is more reason for this important article by Dr. Kim, showing key points for advancing Gen AI research in radiology, making points such as this one here. Oh, let's see.
Boards today.
Yeah, that was an interesting.
All right, that's okay. Anyways, more reason that evaluating LLMs like people could lead to misleading results and misinterpretation of their capabilities, given the possibility of data contamination and the brittleness and stochastic nature of LLMs and their propensity to just talk and interrupt us. So with that, I just want to open it up to maybe Woojin and then the rest of the panel. What do you think about this? We've got these generative AI technologies, making images, making podcasts, even making videos. But how should we be thinking about this, particularly when we evaluate them? And then secondly, when we think about actually using them in real life?
Yeah, so I'll start. So for those of you who need a little bit of an ego boost, by the way, just put up your CV, feed it to a Notebook LM, and just let it create a 7-minute podcast for you. And I think you will be enjoying it quite a bit. So give that a try. So it's not just about papers. You can upload all kinds of documents, and it's very interesting kind of creative response you get. Now, as far as the LLMs, as you can see from my statement, and if you've seen my LinkedIn posts or, X posts, you notice that, I'm not a huge fan of using multiple choice question-based evaluation to test out, these LLMs and their functionalities. And I'm not saying that there is no role for MCQs in LLM evaluation, But when these LLMs start doing really well on these tests, I'm not sure if it's because it's coming from a genuine comprehension by the LLMs or mere statistical correlation or rote memorization, right? So some of the limitations, for example, like if you take an MCQ, and I've done this many, many times, right? It does really, really well, let's say, for example. But if you change slightly some words, in fact, Microsoft research folks have shown this, that if you take the original problem and then you just tweak it a little bit by paraphrasing it or giving it additional context, it actually completely, performs more, poorly. The performance changes completely. So the other thing is, if, for example, if you test A is B relationship, but you end up reversing it and say, hey, can you tell me about B is A? Then it actually fails. And it's been called a reversal curse, unless those models are pre-trained for that B is A relationship. So there is a lot of brittleness when it comes to these LLMs. And, this may sound a little harsh, but, it's kind of irresponsible for you to take questions that you can find online, that you can Google, then ask the LLMs and be wowed by it, because guess what these LLMs are trained on? That's right, the internet, all right? So it's like machine learning 101. You don't put your training data in your tests and be wowed by it, okay? So you don't want to do that. But when you ask questions that you can Google online, you are, experiencing data contamination issue. So my challenge to the researchers out there is I really want folks to figure out a way to evaluate these models that reflect the actual clinical practice of medicine. Try to figure out what's happening under the hood, rather than just be wowed by the fact that it answers certain questions correctly off of a multiple choice. Because let's face it, when was the last time when you tried to read a case that you got in the history that looks like a clinical vignette that you see from these multiple choice questions? And when was the last time when you asked the question, interacted with the patients, that they use the medical jargons that you will see in these clinical vignettes? All right. And finally, the last time I opened up my PACS viewer, it didn't come with, multiple choice options, right? So I like to challenge the research community out there to figure out evaluation methods that actually reflect the actual clinical practice of medicine.
Go ahead, Nina.
I'm going to add to that because, well, even though the Gen AI said that I think AI can outperform radiologists, I never look at that because that's not realistic. What is realistic is having the AI work with the radiologist. It's human plus AI. That cognition together is going to outperform either one alone. And so we should be evaluating them together. I think it's funny how we evaluate radiologists using peer review or peer learning. And then we say, well, now let's evaluate AI systems, whether it's Gen AI or CNNs or NLP on their own. And we compare them to the radiologist. Why don't we actually have them work together and figure out how to better work together? That's what we should be doing instead of comparing one to the other.
Matt, looks like you have some.
Yeah,
honesty.
I'm gonna disagree. Actually,
Okay,
these are really like a goof fest. Okay, so nothing that was said was like something I completely disagree. But have you ever heard the sort of like you never walk into the same river twice? Have you ever heard that before? Right, because the river's always moving. Okay, that information, and you often see this all the time. Oh, these models break, or they're just memorizing things. That was possibly true about 3.5, possibly true, but in some cases by 4. But increasingly, it's not that, right? So 01, actually the most recent Microsoft research paper is actually surprising us to the extent that we are trying to throw real world challenges at it, real world data, complex challenges that are definitely not on the internet. And this thing is surprising us. And remember, this model and these series of models were not specifically trained for medicine, right? These are what you would call sort of emergent behaviors. That's sort of just the general. So like, while some of these things are true, good rules of thumb include when you see these kinds of statements in papers or whatever, make sure you check which model was used. Oftentimes it's Llama or 3.5 or one of the other inferior models. The other interesting lesson that we've learned is multiple times now is that when you try to take one of these models and fine tune it to do medical things, it often does worse than just leaving it alone and doing better prompting. The last thing I'll kind of just touch on, which is this idea of AI plus human. Now that may be true, but we just haven't seen it. We consistently see, as Eric Topol said in the plenary, actually AI just does great on its own, right? The human ends up making it worse. Now, there's probably an aspect of human-computer interaction. We still have a lot of work to do to understand how to work with these models, but they're not stopping their progress towards getting better and better. And that's not just because of more data or more size. There's a third axis that you might have seen with the O1 model, which is time. So giving the model more time to think has currently no upper limits in performance. So there's now 3 axes for scale. Of course, that's why your NVIDIA stock is doing quite well if you have it. But this is really the situation that we're kind of all grappling with, right? We want to make an assumption about where things are. We really just want it to stop. Okay, hold on a second. Now I have an understanding of it. But that's not what's happening. It's a river. That's how I've started to live with it. And so what I often tell folks is plan for the model to be able to do the things that it can't currently quite do now. I totally agree with the benchmark. Understand your benchmark, no matter what your use case, is incredibly important. And there's a lot of efforts going around the academic community to create realistic benchmarks, very difficult tests, just like they do in other verticals. So that's just my point of view. Obviously, there's a reason why there's 5 people here, but I have not seen anything that makes me feel as though these models aren't going to be able to do quite a bit in medicine.
And just as we transition to the next topic here, a quick follow-up question. We have many researchers in our audience. If we take a look, a lot of familiar faces here, and if you take a look at some of the abstracts that we presented at RSNA 2024, we're seeing studies that continue to look at the performance of newer models in training exams, on other multiple choice questions or MCQs. Is the thought here to continue to benchmark our models, the newer ones that come out on these exams, or is there an alternative route? Are we seeing any trends there that our audience can take away here for their future research? And this is open to anybody, no pressure.
I can start. I actually was asked a similar question. There was a digital health advisory committee, which provides advice to the FDA. And the FDA is looking at how are we going to regulate this generative AI. And I got up and I spoke to them about a validation that we did of a generative AI, looking at comparing it to the radiology report. So it was creating a portion of the radiology report, and then we looked at the final report and had that adjudicated by clinicians and took a look at that. And what some people in the audience say, now, interestingly enough, on the Digital Health Advisory Committee to the FDA about AI, there wasn't a single radiologist, which was quite shocking, given that we know so much about it. But regardless, one of the things they were saying is, well, we have to look at outcome measures. If you are comparing the accuracy of an AI, we have to look at how it affects the outcome of the patient. And I think that makes a lot of sense, but is very difficult to do and will take a very long time. And if we don't figure out something else in the meantime, it's not necessarily going to be effective. Now, multiple choice questions on a test that has very little meaning, no. Put it in the point of care, use it in a clinical environment, make sure that it's overseen by a human, and compare. You can see where we're making differences. Now, there is something about bias where, yes, the human might have an automation bias or a complacency bias where they answer a wrong answer because the AI is telling them something. So it's not the only thing that we need to do. Having some kind of benchmark is not the only thing we need to do. We also need to make sure that the end user has access to how the AI is thinking at the point of care in order to make more informed decisions.
So I add to that, and I would say, kind of like what Matt was referring to, these foundation models are very different than what we're used to. And so like the evaluation mechanism, for example, one of those things that got a lot of popularity out there is called LM Arena, where, you give a, particular question and see the output, but blindly, you don't know which, large language model, for example, gave that answer, and people just kind of rate, do you like A versus B? And then after a while, you get this result, like a, arena and this ranking of which model performed at best, right? And this even type of evaluation, even though there are a lot of limitations now, people trying to, game the system, but this already shows that the way these models work and how we look at them and evaluate them is very different than the traditional models. And to, again, what Matt was referring to with how these O1 models are working, well, guess what? I think people are now focusing tremendous amount of effort and thoughts on this, what's called test time compute, or inference compute. And I think, a lot more people are going to be focusing on that with these ON models, for example, or something similar. And so that's going to also raise all kinds of, new challenges. Like, how do we evaluate? For example, the O1 models don't really tell you exactly what is quote unquote thinking. Now, there are some other open source versions of it that actually do tell you. So how are you going to evaluate these models that are thinking potentially for hours before it gives you an answer? So I think it's going to create new problems for researchers, exciting times, really. To figure out, how do we best evaluate this, whether it's for medical reasons, for other use cases. But I think it's gonna, really make us rethink the traditional way of, evaluating and benchmarking and so forth.
So I just want to add, I really think metrics will figure it out, but where we're definitely going is some kind of post-market surveillance of seeing how these products, and those are going to help us determine this. And I want to echo what Matt said. All of these models are learning so much data so quickly, and over time, we can't beat them. I'll pick something that we and other researchers are focusing on, which is uncertainty quantification. What does that mean? It means my model can be really confident this patient does not have a stroke. Some other images, for whatever reason, were maybe 25 or 50% sure. And developers are smart. They're going to focus on those questions or those images, where the model is struggling, so again, low-hanging fruits. When first LMs came out, oh, this is crazy. It's only one projection, how can they be that confident? But you know what? That's easy to fix. So I just think I would be more in Matt's camp.
Well, I have a comment for Matt that I just want to add based on something he said, that he has at Microsoft no data to show that humans and AI are better together. I have quite a lot, so let's talk.
All right, let's go on to our next topic now. So we're going to transition the conversation just a little bit here. So now, really quickly, uncertainty quantification. I think that's a really important topic. It's going to be really important as we start to differentiate models for very similar use cases, some of which we may be seeing a lot more these days in our exhibit halls. But another really hot topic in the exhibit halls is actually this idea of automatic draft reporting, right? These foundation models that can look at images and create drafts. We're going to try and silence our competing podcast hosts here. Looks like we figured it out. So let's go ahead and move on here. So we have papers, we have collaborations, we have groups talking about this idea of vision language models for radiology report generation. A couple of slides here to show you the recent developments, and one of them even providing a user interface that allows you to visualize what this may look like. So for our group here, where are we for this ultimate goal? Are we there yet? Is this our future in 1 year, RSNA 2025? This is what we'll be seeing on the exhibit floor? Or are we still in that kind of green nascent stage where this is all really great in theory, but there are maybe a few kinks in the system that we really need to look at more carefully? I'll open this up to our panel here to respond. Again, I'm looking at Woojin, but no pressure, Woojin.
So this is definitely a hot area, all right? When it comes to, using these foundation models that can not only detect findings from the medical images, extract out findings, and then creating draft report. And you can tell by looking at some of these papers that are coming out. And these papers are not coming out from, say, radiology departments, academic centers. And some of them are. But a lot of these papers are coming out from guys like Microsoft, right? Google, and believe it or not, even guys like Meta. And you might be thinking, Meta? Yes. They're coming out with models like, MetGemini or Myra and, other models like RayDino and RedDino. All these models are coming out from these large companies, from, their research groups. And also when you look at radiology, say, academic departments, there have been models, things like, say, MedVersa from Harvard or Merlin from Stanford. And guess what? There are not startups in this space based on these types of models. So I can tell you right now, one of the hottest trends when it comes to generative AI in radiology using these foundation models is these automated, draft report generation. And so this is definitely gonna advance. Now, there are gonna be a lot of issues that we still have to work through. Main one being regulatory challenges, right? How is FDA is going to deal with these models that can potentially look at hundreds, if not thousands of findings? say from CT of the abdomen and pelvis. That's what these guys are doing, right? There's going to be medical legal questions, workflow issues. We kind of alluded to the automation bias or algorithmic, version issues. And there's going to be a lot of other challenges. So just the fact that you just made a model that can do X, Y, Z doesn't necessarily translate to clinical usefulness and utility and adoption, right? There's a big gap in that. So I'm interested in paying attention closely to this field, what is going to happen. Yes, at next year's RSNA, I bet we're going to see several booths, with these models. We'll see what happens. But I think for sure, if you think about it, the current problems that we're having in radiology is that the volume is increasing constantly, right? The number of radiologists isn't increasing much. There's an increasing gap, and then there's a persistent burnout issue. Something has to exist to help us narrow that gap. And from a technology perspective, I think this has a tremendous amount of potential, but there are going to be also tremendous amount of challenges. But regardless, I think, it's going to be very exciting to see all the progress, both not only in terms of research, but also from a commercial side. And interestingly, you used to be where research would do something and it would take several years before you start to see something commercial. Now, you're starting to see some papers on archive really quickly. And then before the end of the year, you're starting to see already startups in this space. So I think it'll be very interesting to see this.
And it's not only Meta, it's X, formerly Twitter, that solicited reports and images from people, to post. And I think for all of us, we are concerned about these things, but I think we're just getting to the point now where there is a need for us to evaluate how these things are performing and to do that well. And I take the human plus AI is better, or AI. These are hypotheses because in a way we don't know how AI is working with people and how we're going to best use it. Is the situation one where we talk about the pairing of a senior attending and a junior resident, right? The junior resident is highly sensitive. I see all these different what's that? And the senior attending goes, yeah, it's normal. Except the resident points out the rib fracture and you go, oh yeah, I saw that, that's okay. But is it best for AI to work in that mode and to be sensitive? Is it better for it to be specific if we point things out? Or is it better to pair AI and to look at the performance and where the individual radiologist is, and to tune AI to work with them in such a way that the two of them together are better? And or is it better just to give everything to the AI model and take the human out of the loop? There may well be some ways that we can do that, not necessarily on every exam, but could you imagine for breast cancer screening, for mammography, where every other year it's just read by AI? And then every other, on the other years, it's read by a human. The idea being you're still getting the biennial screening by a human that meets standards, but now you've accelerated the pace without adding to the need for workflow. And beyond that, this is all, we're as Wujin said, we're going to be facing a physician shortage across the board in radiology. We're feeling it. 5 years ago, people were saying, we're worried that that AI is going to take our jobs. Now it's like, when is AI going to take our jobs? Please. And I think, we have an obligation. We want to figure out how we can best judge this technology and assure that it is safe and effective for the care of our patients.
Chuck,
sorry.
Chuck, I still need a job, by the way, so let's not get there just yet.
In fact, I think I've hired either the podcast hosts or this autonomous workflow device. But thank you so much, Ali. We'll keep your name on file.
Can I just talk about the breast imaging work environment, since this is what I do every day? So I would have to say, with the standalone AI, it makes sense. It's going to be the most common performed exams, mammogram, chest X-rays that we're going to excel at. And I would tell you, for the mammograms, the FDA has an MQSA that says that a physician must sign every single report. So now I'm hearing from lots of vendors, don't worry, Trump just won. That doesn't mean no more regulation, and I wish it was, that simple. So what's missing that we haven't talked about? It's the trust from the patients that will say, okay, we can go ahead, and just be comfortable with having the AI read it and stop there. But I think for us who are trying to digest this very complicated topic, I think it's even harder for us to explain this to the patients.
So Linda, can I just, so for areas other than mammography, things like chest radiographs or lung nodule screening CTs, do you think that this would be something that one could completely automate? And the model I'm thinking of is, for example, 98, 99% of EKGs are read by automated systems. 1% of them get kicked out and a cardiologist looks at them. For pap smears, 5% are read by a pathologist. But it may be easier in the sense that you just have to, blue is bad and you just have to scan for blue, But are there opportunities here where we could use AI as a force multiplier? In other words, it's not kind of all or nothing, AI or human, either one. But is there a way that we can use AI in such a way that it takes some of the kind of lightens the load and then leaves the more complex and more demanding cases for.
So I would say that that's already happening in my practice and others. So, you get the score about how likely there's a cancer there. So the easy cases can go to an easy list. Those that are very suspicious, we're double reading them, we're taking them more carefully. And by just doing this in 3 buckets, normal, indeterminate with radiologist play plus the suspicious, just looking at the suspicious part, we've doubled our cancer detection rate. So that's good. But yes, inevitably, I think many, many studies, we're going to have to accept over time that an AI will read it and do a great job, but I don't think it would be at the next RSNA.
So I'm going to share an actual experience. So about a year ago at last year's RSNA, we had a sense that this was going to get hot. So actually we showed a demo where we would take one of these foundation models from 2 different companies that they were working on. And we showed to the a version where we would actually take the findings directly from these models, but they don't look like a radiology report that I would create, right? Or I would accept. So we would take those findings and then we put it into our reporting solution, and then we would convert them into the style of that radiologist, right? And I'll be honest with you, on Sunday, I didn't do much demonstration of it. Why? Because I didn't want people to say to me, like, what are you doing? What are you working on, Ujin? Are you trying to be like Jeff Hinton? And so I was kind of afraid. So I showed it to only people that I knew, just kind of get a sense, what's the reaction? And I can tell you by Monday, I was showing it to everyone, because if I showed this, I think, several years ago, the reaction might have been different. But already last year, people were saying exactly what Chuck was saying. When can I have this? People wanted this now. And I think one of the things that we have to think about in terms of when we actually think about the actual implementation of this, right? Let's say a model can look at 220 findings on a chest x-ray that, Dr. Keith Dry a lot of times say, hey, you know what? If a chest x-ray is going to do this autonomously, it needs to be able to detect these many findings. Let's say an AI model, foundation model can do this, right? Now, as a radiologist, if it tells you, here are the 10 things that I found, right? 8 of them are, true. One of them is a false positive. One of them is hallucination. Guess what you're going to end up doing? You're going to be reviewing all those 10 findings. What if that's a 200 findings, 300 findings? Are you going to do it? No. You're going to say, you know what? It's faster for me to just dictate this on my own. So you will have to think about the balance of how is this going to actually be used clinically and useful for my clinical adoption. And that's why I think one of the potential use cases, if these models have a really high negative predictive value, then maybe the normal and the unremarkable, whether it's X-ray or CT or MRs, may have better chance of getting adopted initially, so that there is, like you said, increased trust with these models, and then, get into more, complex cases. I don't know, but that's one thought process that I have when it comes to, potentially these models getting clinically adopted.
Well, I just wanted to say, some of us work at places where normal is remarkable.
Yeah.
Where when you see a normal chest X-ray, you think, Wow, I must have missed something on it. It's that rare.
Sure. I'd also like to comment about normals. It's very logical, right? The negative predictive value is inversely related to disease pathology prevalence. And so negative predictive values are always very high. So it's very logical to say, okay, let's just have the AI take out all of the normals. I'm a reading radiologist. I don't want all my normals to go away. That's like the time I get to take a breath and go, thank goodness I have a normal. Let me reconstruct myself. And also, just like theoretically, if I never see normals anymore, how do I really know what's abnormal? Like, it just doesn't seem right to me. I'm also paid based on an average exam. And an average exam, some of them are normal and some of them are abnormal. So I don't want that. What I would rather us look at are what are the things that AI can help us in our workflow that I hate doing and I derive no satisfaction from it and I'm not good at it. What if an AI summarized all my prior reports? What if an AI gave me better history? What if an AI said that when I get my study and I open it and it's incomplete for some reason, that it makes it complete? What if an AI first did OCR on every single ultrasound worksheet that's there and every single scanned in anything, got the information from that and populated it through an LLM directly into my report? Like, those are all going to make me far more efficient, and I'd rather have my normals and that taken away.
You may have seen our demo. You just listed it all. I totally agree with the back office stuff, right? I mean, I think you've all seen, some of the capabilities of just the vanilla models, not necessarily, we're not getting into agents here. So a couple of things on the research. So first of all, I think that, as somebody who's been at Microsoft now for a few years, the craziest things happen. I've been in AI for a really long time, at least it feels that way. And I've never had anybody come up to me and say, man, I'm so glad that we have this model in my practice, because I will not even work anywhere else that doesn't have this model. People kind of like it. Maybe it's helping them. Maybe it's making them more, confident, whatever. And when folks find out I work at Microsoft, they pull me aside and they say, this DAX Copilot thing, I won't work anywhere without it. I was going to retire. I'm seeing my family. And if you don't know what that is, so DAX Copilot basically just listens to a physician and a patient, records the entire transcript, right? And again, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about your cousin's wedding in between your discussions about knee pain. The whole transcript gets, transcribed, I guess. And then that is turned into an editable note for the physician to quickly sign. So the physician has a conversation with their patient, they turn around, the note's already sitting in Epic. What is the equivalent of a DAX Copilot in radiology? Well, it's not using the text transcript, it's using an image. But it's actually not as straightforward. So Woojan's actually done a lot of work on, educating the community via his prolific social media work, to basically say, if you use the current vision language models like 4.0 or, Llama, whatever else, and you put these medical images in there, it'll hallucinate whatever you can, imagine, right? It does not actually see, quote unquote, what's in the image. And you can have these conversations with a chest X-ray to find out for yourself. So there's a gap. That's a real gap. Now, the model understands the concepts of a radiology report. It understands what a pneumothorax is, what pneumonia is, what cardiomegaly is, but it can't see it. So one of the things that we're really focused on is helping these really smart models see the images. But it's not just shoving a bunch of images in there, hoping for the best, right? We've actually done quite a bit of research learning that the typical way of training this with joint embedding training, right, early fusion, actually constrains the model to see only what the radiologist puts in the report. And that method, as you're starting to see, is not really bearing a lot of fruit. So a lot of the work that we've done is to take it back to first principles. Let's learn everything in the pixel data first, self-supervised. Let's accept the fact that there are going to be newer and newer and newer general reasoners that are getting smarter and smarter. And let's connect them in a modular way. And if I can learn each of the modalities and connect them to a general reasoner that's getting smarter and smarter, I can start to ask it to do tasks like write a report. Or if I'm in a part of the world that may not need to bill for reports all day, and I just need to have an interaction and learn about what's on the image in order to take care of a patient, that's possible. The last thing I'll say is that, for many years, I don't know if you've ever heard this anecdote about a coder who got really frustrated with a bug in a software, and he got a job at the software company, fixed the bug, and then quit. Have you ever heard that before? That's an anecdote. I have that feeling a couple of times, right? Because I've seen so many of these narrow AI models that just look at the single image in front of you and they call that a solution. What's the first thing you tell a new resident? great. You saw all these great things on the image. What did the prior look like? What was in the medical history? That's going to change what you're going to say about that image. That's how you're going to dictate it. So when we took this back to first principles, and that's the Myra 2 work, we said, listen, we need to have a model that can compare priors over time. We need to have a model that understands or can take an indication or even clinical data. And we need that to generate a report and not just spit it out and hope for the best, but actually ground that report so that when you click on the text in the findings, it's going to show you where it's finding those things. Now, is the thing that we've built ready for clinical use? Absolutely not, right? But we open sourced it, and we've open sourced a lot of other models, and several others have as well, because we want to start to raise the competency of the broader community, because we do feel like this is something that we should all be working towards. Bringing in medical imaging into healthcare is so critically important.
So to add what Matt said, I think everyone will agree. For those of us who've been doing AI for a while, I think we would agree, we haven't seen anything that moved this fast, in our in my lifetime, for example. So for example, you were just talking about Myra 2. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think, they published that in September. And then, literally 2 months later, they came out with Myra Seg that takes, that to another level. And I'm guessing like, that's just what I'm seeing on, archive, but Matt is probably seeing something that's far more advanced, right? So imagine how fast these things are moving. And so, it's something that is really exciting and scary at the same time. And also, I just wanted to kind of make sure, I clear for the record that I also love my normal. So I hope that, they don't take that away.
Yeah, so it's clear we're entering a new era, but we have first principles, as Matt was saying, and as Nina was talking about, these metrics, sensitivity, specificity, PPV, and MPV. But Nina, as you and I have talked about on a few occasions, it's really about deriving what are the metrics that capture the value that this provides for radiologists and subsequently to our patients. And that goes beyond statistics, right? Maybe things like cognitive burden, maybe things like how it helps the radiologist feel at the end of the day, in addition to their accuracy. Just real quick, I know that you've also posted charts like this showing different realms of ways that we can quantify or measure this. What are your thoughts on that?
So a lot of people forget, or they just don't realize that the value in an AI system, and it could be the best AI in the world, is only as good as its uptake by the user. So the endpoint is not the creation of the AI. The endpoint is the deployment and use of the AI. How do you know if that's going to happen? Does the data that you get about sensitivity and specificity tell you that? Does the data that it goes through to get FDA clearance or FDA approval tell you that? It doesn't. And so what we do in our practice, because we want to know, are RADs going to use this? Isn't this going to be valuable for the patient at the end? We look at different statistics. And some of those statistics are things like, does it enhance your detection of a finding? So a lot of these on convolutional neural networks or things, even foundation models that are saying yes or no to a finding, we retrospectively evaluate them. We look to see, based on running these through prior studies and looking at prior reports, how much more would the AI find if you added the AI to the radiologist? Now, it always goes both ways. The RAD can add benefit to the AI as well, which is some of the stuff I was talking about with Matt. But we look at that enhanced detection rate. We have found a study or an AI vendor who had created a model that was FDA cleared, and we validated it saying, okay, good, we want to use this. Let's see if it's good enough. The enhanced detection rate was 0. So why would we pay anything for something that's finding things that our radiologists are already finding? There's not a lot of value in that. We actually went back to the vendor, and they have now created a new model. We went back and reevaluated it, and the enhanced detection rate of it is now 28%, like fantastic. So we need to hold people to a standard of, is it going to be valuable in clinical care? So enhanced detection rate is one that we use. We also look at things like the prevalence of disease and the positive predictive value. So I don't consume sensitivity or specificity at the point of care. At the point of care, as a radiologist using the AI, I consume negative and positive predictive value. Now, negative predictive values are always going to be high. So let's talk about positive predictive value. Positive predictive value means that the test, the AI tells you there's a positive finding. How often is it right? And the values that we've seen range from 34%, meaning 2/3 of the time it tells you there's a finding, it's wrong, all the way up to 90, 95%, meaning the vast majority of the time it tells you that it's right, it is right. I want to know that. Which one is 30%? Which one's 50? Which one's 90? Because when I go to my radiologist, I have to set expectations with them if I want them to consume these tools. Every single AI tool, no matter what, even if it's amazing, and many of them are, I love AI, it's still a change to the human and the radiologist, and you have to convince them that that change is worthwhile. So setting expectations, showing them that this is going to provide value, actually showing them cases where it is enhancing detection, all of that is really important. And we think of it as a balance. It's a balance between how much enhanced detection and wow cases where it's really helping you versus those cases where you get a lot of false positives. You have to make sure that you're balancing between the two.
All right. This is all very helpful. And we're unfortunately looking at the clock and realizing I wish we had 2 more hours for this talk. So let's go ahead and talk about one more quick topic here.
Or just the plug for the podcast.
By the way, go ahead and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So a topic that's really close to our hearts here at Radiology AI is reporting guidelines and next steps. We've seen some updates for checklists. We've seen some new checklists, and we have 2 of our authors, our first authors or senior authors here on the panel with us. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on where we are in terms of best practices, for example, for reporting large language models. The MyClear LLM was published in the Korean Journal of Radiology very recently, October 2024. And we're excited to hear this. We're excited to see this. Chuck, if we could start with you, tell us more about this initiative.
So credit for this goes to Sung-Ho Park, who's the editor of Korean Journal of Radiology, and he was kind enough to include Linda and me as co-authors of it. Really, the idea is just when people use LLMs, we want to make sure that we're getting enough information that we can actually judge the scientific quality of the work that's being presented. So even simple things, identifying the model, the version number, the date on which it was used, especially now since things are moving so rapidly. Various parameters, such as the temperature setting, which gives you a sense of how think of it as the number of shots of tequila you're giving the LLM. You raise the temperature and the responses become a little more random. It's they call it stochasticity. But other factors such as how you prompted the model, what kinds of text you presented with, and the sequence in which you presented that information. Because as we've heard, you can get an LLM to agree with you that A is B, but then if you ask it, is B A? And it says, I don't know, or it goes off to talk about something about the weather. No, it's a really useful effort. We're still trying to get a handle and just one of the things, there's remarkable progress. And I'd be interested, Matt and Woojin, and your thoughts on this from kind of the research side. At the MICHI meeting, which is the medical imaging computing, it's a kind of more engineering oriented meeting. Jan LeCun, who's certainly one of the founders of deep learning, was rather skeptical of generative models. Because although they can string words together, they don't have the ability to reason and to apply logic. And for those who've seen it, there's something called the 3-liter problem. You have a 2-liter bucket and a 5-liter bucket, and the question is, how do you end up with 3 liters of water? And ChatGPT and earlier versions, certainly of generative AI, would give you a 12-step process, and the final step reads, and now you have 3 liters of water in the 2-liter bucket. So there is progress being made, but getting these models to understand logic and to understand probability is really one of the challenges that we have going forward.
And Linda, a quick question for you in terms of what you've seen as editor-in-chief of Radiology. Are you seeing the community converge on these guidelines, or are we still seeing heterogeneity in terms of providing these checklists with submissions? Any thoughts on, or maybe even some guidance for our researchers here, when they're creating their research for submission?
So I would say that we're starting to see some more compliance with it, but it still is quite heterogeneous. So, with my research group, I tell them, look at the checklist first before you start writing. That's the easiest way. Then that way we're not torturing you. So I'd say read the instructions. And the other say, so I work with Yana Kuhn at NYU, and yes, he's always been skeptical, but he's starting to come around the corner now.
And just to mention too, the claim guideline, which is the one we published the 2024 update on, the panel that reviewed that was not just radiologists. This was people from surgery, from ophthalmology, from dermatology, pathology, a variety of imaging-oriented medical specialties. And we're starting to see the adoption of guidelines like this. In fact, the guideline itself doesn't even use the word radiology. There's nowhere does that appear. It's all about medical imaging, for example. So the hope is that these guidelines will help all of us improve the quality of the science that we see, and it helps us as those who have to read the papers, to understand if the information is there that allows us to make judgment about it.
Hey, Chuck and Linda, I don't know if you guys have ever tried this, but did you ever use the paper and ask a model to see how it did on the guidelines? Have you tried that?
In fact, that is work in progress. We have a tool that some of our trainee editorial board members are building that allows one to fill out a web form of the guideline. It generates a JSON document and a PDF file that then will be submitted with the paper. But then one of the other tasks is, can we use a large language model to read the manuscript and see if the information that's been marked as the claim, in the claim guideline is valid, or to fill out that guideline for us, right? So far, the early results, it's kind of 60-70%, I think, is kind of the peak performance of it. So again,
We can help you.
I think, Matt, there's work to be done, and it depends on the tools that you're using. And some of these things, as you said, if you have sort of infinite compute power and time, the models can do better, will improve and do better. If you're running something that's, on your home PC, in a sense, you may be limited in what you can do. But we're exploring this as a way that we might be able to help improve, what we want to do as our goal is not just to have people fill out a checklist, but to use this as a way to guide authors, to help them understand what information they need to provide in order for their science to be reproducible.
So,
So AI can take flight.
yeah.
For those listening online,
Birds are real.
Birds are real. They exist. It's not generative content just yet. We're on the matrix just yet. Anyways, Woojin, please.
So, Linda can attest to this. I'm extremely hard grader when it comes to these papers. Even though I left academic radiology many years ago, I still, help out in terms of reviewing these papers. And I'm hopeful that, yes, guidelines like these will help, raise the quality of these papers. But not to give you guys more homework or work, but, I think one of the things that we're also going to need guidelines for these checklists and whatnot are, a lot of people are now starting to use, retrieval augmented generation along with these LLMs, right? People are writing papers around it. Now, there are some of the papers that I haven't seen, but I think we're going to see starting next year are areas around AI agents and agentic AI. And, I think, for example, year 2025, I think it's going to be called the year of agentic AI. I think there's going to be a lot of hype around it. A lot of people are super, focused on this. If you look at the generative AI world outside of radiology, and I suspect, a lot of researchers, I'm really excited to see what kind of, interesting use cases that people come up with using agentic AI. But that means, people are going to write papers and we're going to have to evaluate them. And I think some of the checklist items, may have to be created for not only RAG, but also, these agentic AI as, people are starting to get into this. And I suspect, I won't be too surprised by next year at RSNA, at the exhibit halls, people are going to have these, banners with, agentic AI driven workflow, whether that's real or not. But I think that's going to be another buzzword that's going to come. And it would be interested in seeing, what kind of guidelines we'll be able to create so that we will have high quality papers coming out of this around this topic.
Woojin, do you think that that's something that's just hitting the peak of the Gartner hype cycle at this moment?
Well, we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of interest in, and I think, there also, Matt, I'll be interested in what your thoughts are, because you got, AutoGen and all those kinds of, types of applications and tools to make this happen. right now I'm a little bit bullish, mainly because there's so many people interested in it. So many people are bullish about this technology. So whether it's going to actually work or not, I'm not sure, but I'm kind of hopeful that it will. And then, I think it could have the potential to really help reduce radiologists from doing a lot of repetitive mundane tasks. So I'm kind of hopeful, and would be really interested to see, what people kind of, take advantage of this technology. But Matt, I know you know a lot about this. So
You're correct. Agent-based workflows. I think we are now, I think it was just 2 weeks ago, launched our entire agents sort of toolkit, basically, right? It's called AI Foundry. We have played around with agents quite a bit, and it's really interesting. And just for the agent has a bunch of different, definitions, but the one that maybe makes the most sense here is you're just calling a model that maybe has a different system prompt. So think of it like a tumor board. This is my favorite example. So in a tumor board, you have different physicians with different expertise. Maybe you have a radiation oncologist, a surgeon, a radiologist, a pathologist, right? And they're all going to have different perspectives on a patient case because of their knowledge and background. So imagine having hundreds of agents, thousands of agents. They're all performing different tasks, but they've been prompted in a different way. They're grounded to different documents. They're given different tasks. Some can access the internet. Some can look at PubMed. Some can look at a pathology image. Looks like the lights are going down. Anyway, check out AI Foundry if you want to learn more, and I'll leave it there.
Yeah, fireside chat. Well, that might be our cue. So thank you all for joining us here for the 2024 edition of the Radiology AI Fireside Chat. It's been a pleasure. My name is Paul Yi. I'd like to thank all of our guests here. Let's give them one round of applause.
And my name is Ali Tejani. We really appreciate you here at the AI Podcast Fireside Chat. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Let us know what you think. Subscribe, and it's time to party. Thank you everyone so much for being here. One more round of applause, and we'll see you next time.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Radiology Artificial Intelligence Podcast. Shout out to Yuri Ishimchisen for our podcast music and to the RSNA podcast staff.
Email us at podcasts@rsna.org anytime with questions, feedback, or suggestions.